You want to see more content like this.
And please leave comments as well. We do read the comments.
Yes, we do read comments.
And sometimes cry.
We'll cover reading comments at the end. All right, so first, I would like for all my panelists to go down the line. Introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Scott Moore. I'm the audio producer for the Blood Crow stories along with Miss Ellie Collins.
My name is JC Delatorre. I'm the writer and creator for Continuum Force and Vampires of Whitechapel.
Hi, I am Rita Delatorre. I am also a writer, producer, voice actor for Vampires of Whitechapel and Continuum Force.
Hi, my name is Sean Weiland. I'm wow, I'm early.
Is that DragonCon time?
It's dragging me down.
Oh my.
Yeah, I'm back on top.
It's going to be an hour of that.
It really is. So I'm a voice actor, and I'm a sound designer, and I've been working with audio for a long time, and presently I'm working on a new audio drama podcast called Hex Support, which is Office Space, not Office Space. I don't care. With monsters in an office. And I also produce my own podcast called Wasted Knowledge, which is two bartenders interviewing subject matter experts. And then I also work on various other audio projects, editing and making sounds with various objects.
And I am Ellie Collins. I write and direct the Blood Crow stories with Scott. This is the furthest we've ever been away from each other on a panel.
Do you want us to
But
shift?
no.
We can
No
totally
further.
shift. Sean can become Rita, you know.
We
Jason can become
see
Sean.
we
We'll
see
just
each
shift.
other all the dang time anyway. We need some
Normally
space.
trapped like 10 inches together in a booth. Like, what up? And I do voice acting on the show and voice acting on various other podcasts and run a massive D&D campaign.
Ooh.
That I'm also on.
Yeah, that you're also on. My wonderful Goliath barbarian. If only.
Can we play D&D now?
It's not Monday yet.
It's close.
So close. So God. Anyway. So, first we're going to, if you guys came to our other audio drama panels, you're going to hear some kind of similar questions, but these are going to go a bit more in depth because we're talking about the actual production of it as opposed to our previous panel, which was getting started. So in getting started, we tell you kind of the basic blocks of where to go. This panel, we're going to cover these things more in depth. So we're going to start with conceptualizing and writing, how to find the story that you want to tell, and how do you make sure that that is engaging and exciting for listeners and a story that you really want to put out there. How do you decide what story to put forth versus a story that you just think is something cool to do with your friends?
I found a writer.
I told you I wanted to do a show.
For me, it's I've been developing Continuum Force for quite a long time. It was a short story that was in one of my my collections.
Anthologies.
Anthologies, yep. Same thing with Vampires of Whitechapel. It kind of morphed out of that. I did want to tell more stories with Vampires of Whitechapel, so creating the mythology for that one has actually been a lot more fun. Continuum Force is more of I take you to where I always wanted to go and hope you dig it. You know? Like I want to go to ancient Rome, I wanted to go to Egypt, I wanted to go go to Valley Forge and see how that all went down. So I do that kind of stuff, but with Vampires of Whitechapel, I really, and I'm sorry for anybody that is a Twilight fan, but I really hated Twilight. It made me so angry. So I wanted to fix that and make vampire scary again. So, and that with that as my marching order, I kind of developed my stories out of that, made Jack the Ripper a vampire, and kind of went from there.
And it's really, really funny because in Vampires of Whitechapel, Jack the Ripper is actually pretty hilarious. He's my favorite character because he just has such a sadistic humor.
Yes.
And I love him because of that.
And Alexander is fantastic as Jack. Yeah.
Actually, Alexander voices both the characters.
You don't say.
Okay. Anyway, but yeah, it's great how we were just able to take this short story that he originally wrote and just flush it out into this whole series. And there's so many ideas that are still running in our head that we're just going to be able to continue with it for a while.
And like I said, how to get there is basically, I like a lot of stuff, a lot of history, and I like to play around in those kind of past. and I just kind of hope that you dig it too. So.
What about you, Sean?
I'm not really a writer. That's I generally love to find stories that I connect with. So I work with a writer director, and she usually be like, oh, this is the concept for this episode and this and that. And if I already understand a character, I can provide feedback. But when it comes to initial conceptualizing, my role has always been of an audience member kind of feedback, like, yes, this seems really good, or I don't get it, can you clarify, because I'm not sure where the entertainment or where the fun or the interest is.
Yeah. And for me, with Blood Crow, Scott had studio space. He really wanted to make a show. I really wanted to make a show because I like telling horror stories. For anyone that comes to Blood Crow panels, I am an absolute chicken, and I don't watch horror because I have OCD and I won't sleep for 4 days afterwards. But I like writing horror, and I like exploring that level of psyche, so I wanted to put together a LGBT-leaning horror show because we usually just wind up being the throwaway death and everything. So what if we were the heroes and also the cool deaths?
Well, and to that too, like, I'm not a big horror movie person either, but this show gave me an opportunity to play with sounds and to come up with...
I think that makes us better horror producers.
I think so.
Because if we can make ourselves go, ugh.
Yeah, so, but for me, it was an opportunity to play with sound. I'm an audio engineer, audio producer, but to play in a space that I'm not typically used to.
And then in the concept part of it, that was a story, that was a kind of show that we felt was like...
We will get to questions,
yeah,
don't worry.
We'll be doing questions at the end. We did feel like that was a story or a kind of show that was good to put forward for representation purposes, but like our D&D campaign is 8 characters, none human leaning at all. Like Volo's Guide to Monsters is pretty much what we went off of.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful campaign. It's very dramatic. It's very funny. It's been a great campaign, but then not every hobby has to be a hustle.
Yeah.
And we're like, this is a fun story, but I don't think it's really good for a podcast.
Our D&D is our break from the podcast, honestly.
Because it's mostly the cast.
Yeah. Pretty much everyone on there is in the cast, but like we were spending so much time that was all we were doing. Our only times hanging out was working on the show, so that was our outlet to kind of get a break.
We do still have those moments though of going, man, that would be so good on a show.
Yeah.
Like y'all's big 4-level boss fight that you just went through. So next, let's move on to getting into putting together the show once you know that you want to do it. So last panel we gave some generic product recommendations for recording, writing, and producing, but go a little bit more in depth on the products that you choose to work with and why.
So admittedly, I was at a major advantage because I was fresh out of audio school, and through networks, I was able to start up a studio in Lawrenceville. So I had full studio gear. That said, the studio went bye-bye, and so pretty much I have my computer over there. And we partnered up with Atlanta Radio Theater Company. And they're gracious enough to allow us to use their studio.
You're extremely fortunate.
Yeah, but that said, we have also used a Blue Yeti connected to a computer. We've used, a cheap condenser mic from Amazon into a computer.
When we forget halfway through D&D that we need a line.
Yeah, it's like, we got to get a line before everyone leaves tonight or something. We have people who record remotely. You got to use what you have, and we've had, like I said, we've had to do mobile recordings. Products I use, and I will I'm not getting paid for this, although Zoom, if you're listening,
Yes.
Zoom recorders. The Zoom H4s is probably one of the most industry standard as far as TV film production, at least on the indie level. I have a Zoom L12 board that's over there that I just bought. So I have 8 channels now for multiple mics and multiple sessions, and I can record remotely, so I don't have to always be tethered to a laptop or a computer. So.
Yep. And same for us. I mean, we don't have the luxury of a studio, so
We created our own.
Yeah, we're actually in the process of building our own now.
Once I get a house.
Yeah, we're
converting
actually
part of my
adding
garage.
almost an additional 400 square feet to our house, so we can have an office / film / audio studio.
Yep. But not everybody can do that, and we definitely couldn't do that right away. So basically, we found the most quiet place in our house to be able to record, and we were a little bit lucky because we had just finished filming our first feature film. So we actually had some microphones already available. So we had a Sennheiser. We also had a
Rode microphone. Plus, we have our Blue microphone and a Yeti as well.
Yeah.
But we use the Sennheiser probably more often than not.
Yeah, because that gives us the most crisp quality. But I mean, we do a ton of remote recordings with our actors. About I'd say 60% of our cast is probably all remote actors. So and they have all kinds of equipment. They use blue snowballs. They use whatever they have lying around, and it's definitely a chore trying to get all that to kind of sound the same.
and one to kind of piggyback off what you say. One thing that helps too is if you buy those moving blankets. You know, the big, heavy moving blankets that you see in U-Hauls.
Yeah.
Those things are great to, kind of cover yourself with over a microphone to kind of, keep out some of that.
I call that my babushka booth.
Yeah, to keep out the room tone and stuff like that.
And even something as simple as just ordering like a bulk order of like acoustic panels.
Yeah.
Just the little foam thingies with all the little ridges. We bought a whole bunch of that and then just lined our walk-in closet with it.
So with that, we have a shop here in Atlanta. I don't know if these kind of shops exist everywhere, but it's a place, I think it's called Music Go Round.
Music Go Round.
Where they have used equipment, and when studios go down, because you just spray adhesive those foam tiles to the wall, I picked up a pack of 20 used foam tiles for $8.
That's lucky. Wow.
So
and I'm,
check your used music stores.
Yeah, I mean, and there's also, there's always thrift store. I mean, not thrift stores, but pawn shops.
Yeah, and one of the things that actually was good for us is we bought one of those silly, little miniature.
The little tabletop ones that kind of curve out.
Yeah,
that are like plastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're not expensive.
I have one of those as well.
Yeah.
I use that.
And they work great. I mean, they really work well.
They're about $100. They just attach to
You can get them
a
for
microphone
like
stand.
50 on Amazon.
There's cheaper ones too. Yeah, I mean,
and they're good to get started if you've got shag carpet. Which I do upstairs, and the best audio you got from me on a
absolutely
on a line
no,
was
it works.
I couldn't find my sound shield, so I just literally face planted into the ground with my microphone, and the carpet itself was really insulating.
The main thing is sound absorption.
Yes.
Yeah. It's funny because when we bought our sound shield, it works great, but our Sennheiser microphone is like this long.
Well, longer than that.
Yeah.
It's a shotgun
like
It comes
long.
out of it.
Yeah. So it was sticking out, and I'm like, I gotta fix this. So all I did was grab some like cheap foam core board from the Dollar Tree.
Yep.
Stuck it on both sides, made it longer, put some acoustic panels on it, and I'm like, yay, perfect.
So I will say for acoustic foam, most of the time you use a spray mount adhesive. You can also, and this is after I did it a couple times and going, I can't breathe. I'm pretty sure there's adhesive in my lungs, and now it's everywhere. You can use
T-pins?
Well, you can use T-pins if you put it in like a drop ceiling. Which is usually what I do.
I just do it in my wall.
But so if you don't want to
Wig
damage your wall,
pins for cosplayers.
something that pulls off easy is a silicone kitchen caulk, 100% silicone that has whatever the chemical name for vinegar is.
Oh,
so when it cures, it puts off vinegar fumes, and it goes away in like 24 hours. It's fantastic, and that's what I've been using since I found out about it. So for like the last couple of years.
Good to know.
Me being a cosplayer, I just use T-pins. For cosplayers, it's the pin that you put in your wig to keep it on the wig head, because you can only buy those in a pack of 100 for some reason. So I just stick that straight through the middle of it, and it holds it.
That's also true.
But so, keeping with the sound production, when we are putting together audio for a scene, there's a lot of sounds that are naturally occurring that we think about. Every time me and Sean's elbows have touched this table, it makes a sound. Every time I put down my soda, every clink. But
Or
when
hearing
you're,
the muffled,
the muffled
muffle of
game
another
show
panel.
to the right.
Yeah.
So how do you know when to cut a sound because you're seen as becoming too muddy or too complex, and the sound just doesn't need to be there, even though it logically should?
I'm sorry.
You go ahead.
I focus on the sounds that are most important to further the dramatic action of a scene. So, if I'm in a bar, I'll start with the bar background sounds, and then I'll just undercut it as soon as the actual dialogue starts. And then from there, you might have a cup going down. Generally, if someone's making a point, they have cups. Gotcha.
Yeah.
But too much happens a lot, and so it's really if you don't need to hear a waitress taking an order at the table next to the people in the bar.
Yeah.
So it's just starting to say, all right, well, that doesn't really further the action, so let's start chopping stuff out.
And I think in the beginning we had a lot of stress about that, of like, oh, but we're cutting sounds that should be there, and then realize that the listeners didn't even notice because they're listening to the sounds that are important to the moment.
Yep. For me, I mean, I cheat a little bit, and what I mean by that is
Just a little bit.
And what I mean by that is a lot of times, like I said, we have a lot of remote actors, so I have to kind of try to make them sound like they're in the same room. So I will use a lot of ambiance, a lot of sound design to try to make it sound like they're in the same room. So I try to find a room tone that's there's a great website called Soundly that we use for a lot of our sound effects. We don't necessarily have we don't create our own sounds, unfortunately. We would love to do that, but
You can.
I know we can, but we just
It's so
haven't.
much fun.
Buy one of those tools and just walk around with it all the
It's so
time.
much fun to
Oh,
just
yeah.
smash a honeydew to make someone's head
Yeah,
explode.
we just haven't gone that far yet.
Produce section, best
but-
for sound effects.
But they have a great section of just room tone, and we would just lay the room tone track. If there's any kind of other sound effects, like for example on Continuum Force, the Continuum, the ship that we have, the time ship that we have, has a specific hum and has these beeps and boops and stuff that have to be on there. So we just lay that down, and a lot of that takes up a lot of the clinks and the other weird stuff that happens when you're recording.
We did that
and-
a lot in our first season
and-
because everyone
Yeah.
was on a cruise ship.
Yeah.
So we just had a low engine hum in every single scene.
Yeah, and it just kind of drowns it out. So it in a way, it kind of solves itself. Now, if there are scenes where where it's completely silent and we can't do that, then I use a software called RX Elements.
yes.
Um,
Yes.
And we were very lucky because we got it on, because it's like usually like $200 or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the whole suite is like a couple, like $200 to $300.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And we got lucky because we caught it on a $10 sale.
Oh, we got
Yeah.
it for $10.
For anyone audio, there's a website called pluginboutique.com. They often run sales on different plugins. This one is like specifically noise reduction.
Yeah, and I highly recommend it.
Because it's very user friendly
Yeah.
and very, very easy to learn.
It's a lifesaver.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of this software feels very daunting when you first download it, but it actually, once you get in and make a few mistakes, it's
Yeah.
a lot easier.
As far as what I do, I always start with the dialogue first, because we're an audio drama. That's your primary source of the story, and then I try to build the world around it. So I always edit. I always get a rough dialogue edit before I start laying in sound effects and ambiance and stuff like that. A big trick to it is layering. But layering at different levels. So, it's for like a bar scene, I may start with a basic, bar scene sound that I've pulled off of Freesound or a couple of other sound effects libraries I have, and then I'll occasionally, or actually no, like season 3, one of our first episode takes place in a ramen shop. So, I got like basic dining sound, so it sounds kind of like a diner. And then, I had to layer in Ellie
Me being the robot noodle shop owner.
saying, I'm exactly, and just every so often just sprinkle that in the scene, so it sounds like the robots are going to a different table or something like that. For another scene was in a nightclub, so I had to take one of our actors, and it's supposed to be this huge nightclub that's got like big announcers and everything like that. So I'm blasting, techno music, and then I have our one of our actors, record, welcome to
Carnival.
Welcome to Carnival. And saying it in Spanish and German and other languages. So you have to be creative with it. You have to create that space that's believable. I mean, we've we've been to clubs, we've been outside, we've been listen to the world around you, and that will kind of tell you what you need for the scene.
Yeah, and then save that setup.
And
you'll
then
eventually
save
need that scene again,
and then
you'll
copy
go,
and paste it.
What did I layer to make this?
Yeah,
Save it out,
it's not.
label it.
And one thing,
Tag it.
and we'll probably get into this more, but I have used templates for your recordings. I have a whole template. I have 4 tracks for ambience. I have a track for music. I have 5 tracks for sound effects, and then I'll add more as I need them.
And do you guys put a track for each actor? Because that's
absolutely.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every actor's there.
Yeah, I tried. I
Unless
first
they
season.
play 2 characters at once.
First season, I think I tried to do only like 3 tracks, and it's like, no, this isn't gonna work.
Yeah, we actually have one actor that plays 2 of our main characters, and I have him on different tracks because I have to kind of adjust his sound just slightly so that it doesn't confuse the listener.
Yeah, I play a robot and a Cerberus.
A lot of our actors double and triple up.
Yeah, I had to do those in the same scene, so I made sure to give space in between for silence so that Scott could cut it, because my robot voice has to have an effect. But if I went too close with the Cerberus's lines, then it would bleed into her lines, and it makes editing a terrible fiasco.
Once and like you said, using templates, it makes it a lot easier because I'm already kind of I know. Well, when he's Jack the Ripper, he has to have a little bit lower voice. He's got the Cockney accent, and if he's going, vamping out, then it just gets really, really deep, and he's going, So,
Yeah.
And then when he's Alistair, he's a little bit more posh, and that whole thing. So, so knowing those 2 differences, I'm able to just apply that special effect or sound effect to one track, and it just carries over to all the different parts.
I just want to mention, as we were talking, we kind of started with the room tone and background noise and layering and mixing. One important thing that we didn't say, but we're kind of talking about, was the hertz that room tone tends to exist at, and then mixing that with everything else in your podcast. So like having a cruise ship hum, that's a very low hertz sound effect.
Absolutely.
Where most voices aren't going to exist, but you do have to be very cognizant of the other sounds you're putting in there, where they exist, and if they're gonna interfere with where your human voice or your demons and whatever voices are existing.
And so for example, especially this season, we've featured a lot of music. We've featured a lot of guest artists. So, and it's music in the background. Sometimes it's like in the scene, like they're listening to on a radio. Sometimes it's just dramatic music.
Sometimes it's not.
But what I do with music is I always cut out. I always dip, kind of between like the 500 to 2,000 range, which is where the human voice mainly exists, just so it doesn't clash with the, again, for me, the voice is everything. Everything starts with the voice. We're a podcast. We got to talk.
Yep.
So and this is where we're getting into kind of mixing here, but EQ is your best friend. Just notching out a couple of dBs.
Yep.
I mean, I worked in an open concept call center, and we had room tone that played in the call center that was just a air conditioner. Yeah. It just sounded like an air conditioner. That was it. But I was sitting this close to the next person, and our customers couldn't hear each other.
Right.
So with that, let's go on to release schedule, choosing your release schedule, and when that release schedule becomes too much, how do you prevent burnout? Because I think Scott and I are hitting
I've hit it plenty of times.
Yeah.
So we set our release schedule for the 1st and 15th. because we wanted that consistent schedule, and that kind of fit with what we're trying to do. And, you know, for the most, and I mean, we've never missed a deadline, you know, but there's times where it's just like, we don't have the recordings done, or life happens.
There's times you're uploading in the FedEx Kinkos of Dragon Con.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. That's a
So
great question.
our show is, you know, roughly 30 minutes long, give or take, and, you know, but we set that from day one, like before we ever hit record, that this is what the schedule is going to be like, which works for me because I work better on a schedule, you know, and you know, for me, you know, and Ellie will be able to talk more on writing, you know, audio is, you know, it just kind of becomes automatic at some point for me.
I wish writing did.
Well, and you know, but I do hit burnout. I don't, you know, once an episode's released, I try not to do anything for the show for the next 2-3 days, just to give me that separation.
That's why we have D&D.
You know, that's what, you know, now that's why we have D&D. But at the same time, it's like there's, you know, last year this time, I had to get 3 episodes done in a 3-week time period to get to our composer at the time. You know, so I'm trying to get 3 episodes done while getting ready for Dragon Con, which is not fun. But this, for me, having the schedule allows me to structure my time better. So I, you know, instead of, you know, when I first started, you know, I was doing 6 to 8 hour sessions at a pop, just editing and mixing and driving myself insane in the process. Mm-hmm. Now I split it up. I do an hour or two each night of the week, you know, and then I have room if I'm just, you know, exhausted or I want to go out or whatever, you know, I can take that night off and I'm not behind schedule. So, you know, for me, you know, is the structure of a schedule helps.
Work early so that you can not work as much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and this is our first season of, it wasn't a dramatic podcast, but of Wasted Knowledge. I was in charge of all the releases and uploads and putting out, and I was like, all right, each interview session is going to be two separate episodes. We'll release one week, one the next week, take 2 weeks off. That was the cycle, and all of a sudden I got just way overloaded. I had 3 episodes in the can. I was struggling to release and edit on time. So really, when we finished the season, I said, all right, we're gonna take a break, wait for season 2, like 2-3 months out, but we're gonna start recording now, so we can just have everything ready, and then start releasing, because it sneaks up on you so fast.
Absolutely.
And I will say, we also are fortunate that our actors are goofballs.
Yeah.
And so we have usually a good amount of bloopers to pull from. So, you know,
So if stuff gets too much, we could just go, bloopers episode.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, there's been times where it's just like, yeah, we're not going to do it. Here's a bloopers episode. We'll get you, you know, or, you know, we've had to split episodes because they're ending up in the 40 beyond.
Yeah, because we
time,
try to keep 20 to 30 minutes, but if it hits 45 minutes, we'll split it.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I originally wrote the first couple episodes of Continuum Force, that's kind of where we ended up, about an hour and a half, and quickly realized that that's not the right range for an audio drama. You really want to be about 25 to 30 minutes. So then I had to cut those episodes so that they were 25 to 30 minutes, and that is a pain in the ass. So don't ever try that. The other thing I would, and this is probably a very golden piece of advice, don't do 2 shows at once like I did. You will kill yourself.
Yeah, we released Continuum Force first, and then Vampires of Whitechapel the following week, and we were alternating episodes every single week.
Yes.
For 12 weeks, and that was not good. We
Yes.
started to get behind on producing the show and completing the episodes, and even though we got everything out on time, but it was really, really rough because it just took up all of our free time.
And it won't be a mistake that I will repeat. But the one thing I will say, and I think it's really important, that if you're trying to develop your own show, is that make sure whatever schedule you decide to release in, that you are consistently hitting that schedule, because that it's basically a contract between you and your listeners. And if If you break that, then you're going to break their trust, and then you'll lose them. So definitely, like, ours was every 2 weeks you're going to have a new episode of Continuum Force. Every 2 weeks you're going to have a new episode of Vampires of Whitechapel. And we hit that every 2 weeks.
And even if you just do once a month, like we set up for twice a month just because we felt that was the best for us. You got to do what works for you. If it's just once a month, as long as they know that it's out that day on that month, then you're good.
And then don't be afraid to change it if you need to. We just made an announcement with Blood Crow that season 4 is technically our last full season because it's a full-time job for me and Scott on top of the full-time jobs that we already have. Releasing on the 1st and 15th of every month. We don't do breaks between seasons, so the 1st and 15th of every month for the past 4 years, we have released something. And we have a wonderful network of people who've gotten into horror writing because of us. So we decided for season 5 to take care of ourselves and to take care of the show because we don't want the show to end because we just burnt out completely. We're shifting to opening our doors to new horror writers, and we're going to start doing quarterly short stories instead.
Well, and you even made an adjustment this past season. The
we
past,
have a
the
new
first
head writer.
The first season you did all the writing. Second season, second and third seasons you've brought in other writers for episodes. Season 4 is now a completely different writer.
Yeah, transitioning to showrunner has been very uncomfortable, but a necessary thing for self-care.
And for me, audio is pretty mechanical, but instead of doing, like I said, 6 to 8 hour sessions, doing 1 or 2 hours a day, just keeps the burnout at bay.
Yeah. One of the ways that we started to manage the workload was she began to help me. She would take the original raw files from our actors. She would do the initial edit and also kind of pick which takes that she thought worked best. And then I could take that, bring that into our template, and be able to work with that. And 9 times out of 10, we've been married 18 years, so we know how each other thinks. So she's able to pick exactly what I would pick, and
and that's something I'm working on. Is I've approached a couple people about just can you do the basic rough edit for me? I'll even pay you.
Yeah.
And in fact, he was getting on me about it at first because the way he would do it was he would plop in all the lines because he wanted to see how it all sounded together. Not me. I would actually go line by line, pick out, which was the best take, and I would save it and move on to the next one without actually putting it all together.
Yeah.
But unlike him, I just have this really good knack of making how everything's going to sound in my head. And so I can just move on to the next one and to the next one and get through it a whole lot quicker than he would.
Yeah, it's an amazing skill set that she has that I wish I had because, the biggest challenge when you have remote actors is because they're not in the same room, they're not recording together, you have to kind of craft it so that it sounds like they're in the same room, that they're talking with each other, and that, it's a conversation going back and forth. And that's not always easy, and usually our actors will give us, 2 or 3 different takes, and we're going to have to marry those together. So.
And I just ended up that I had a good ear for that.
She's very good.
I think there were only 2 times where you went back because you didn't like the take that I had picked out.
Yeah,
but considering out of hundreds and hundreds, we only had
all the minutes that
couple
we've
times,
had of our episodes.
I'm like, not too bad.
Yeah.
So the next thing, which is one that we don't normally talk about, is knowing when to end your story.
That's a great question.
Because especially in the podcast world, we want to keep doing it forever, but sometimes a story can drag, and there's nothing sadder than the slow death of a podcast that was once brilliant. We specifically set up our show to prevent that. Every season of Blood Crow is 100% insular to its own world. There's a narrative framing device that if you've listened to our show, those opening 3 minutes are their own story. But knowing, especially in horror, because horror, if it drags on, gets really old really quick. So knowing to end it at 20 episodes was important for us. And knowing that it was okay to end the story because we still have people discovering season 1. And that was 4 years ago.
And again, I think this goes back to structure.
Yeah.
You set up a structure and you fill everything in from there. Knowing that we would be 2 episodes a month, 20 episodes a season makes a lot of decision making easier for both of us, you know, and especially for you as a writer.
Until I get to the finale and go,
Yeah.
I got too much to do.
But having that structure in place, you know, because you know, and you know, she alluded, as Ellie alluded to, there's plenty of podcasts that start out, you know, and they start out as a hobby and then they blew up, and then they're trying, you know, and then but they're you can tell
They're
they're
trapped
losing
now,
steam
yeah.
and they're
Yeah.
trapped in this one story.
Yep.
You know, for us, we wanted to avoid that, so saying 20 episodes kept that from happening.
So I'm going to give Dragon Con an exclusive.
Oh.
Yes. And I've never told this to anybody in our audience. Nobody knows this.
Oh.
But Continuum Force, I have planned for a 3-year run.
And that's it.
And that's it.
So 3 seasons of 12 episodes.
Plus Patreon exclusives like a Halloween episode and
Yeah.
you know, things like that. But yeah, that's it. At the end of year 3, we're going to be done. And the reason why I wanted to do that is exactly what you said. I didn't want to get stale, and I didn't want to run out of ideas. And I have a specific story arc that I want to follow. And once I get to the end, I think that's the logical choice for it to end. So
And knowing that it's okay to do that, I think, is important for a lot of
yes,
creators.
and I'm terrified about it because, you know, I know that people are starting to really get into the show, and I know that when it gets to that end, that people aren't going to be happy when they get when I get to the end.
Yeah, but
But you'll still find new people.
Yes.
yeah, at the same time, you know, I think people enjoy listening to a podcast, like binge watching, right? Binge listening to a podcast that has a logical end.
Yep.
Because nothing is worse than, you know, watching a show only to find out
It gets
it's canceled
midway
right?
through without a good resolution, right? And one other thing that I wanted to mention, the big difference with Vampires of Whitechapel is I have no idea how I'm going to end that. And
So that might be going for a
you
while.
know, and the weird dichotomy with the show is that it's very Anne Rice, where the vampires are kind of like the anti-heroes, and it's told from the vampire point of view. So do I kill them? Do I not? You know, will they be mad at me if I kill them? You know, the humans are kind of the bad guys, but really they're the good guys because they're stopping the vampires from eating people. So it's like, you know, I honestly have no idea how that's going to end. So, and that in itself is very scary.
But it's not just finding the logical end to whatever series that you're working on. For us, it's also wanting to move on to other projects as
Right.
well. We have a massive long list of
Things we wanna
stories we
do.
can tell,
Yeah.
and we want to be able to get to them.
Yep. But we don't. We like you guys. We work full-time jobs, and you know, so far this hasn't been paying our bills yet. So you know, we have to budget our time, and you know,
Right.
sometimes you just got to move on.
And that right there is like, you know, why we're kind of making our shift as well, not just to avoid burnout, but also we both
Work.
have projects and other things we want to do, and we don't want the show to end, obviously, because we enjoy it and we love, you know, the community we've built, you know, and you don't want to just, you know, go, okay, we're done, bye, you know. But at the same time, you know, we're growing, and we have other projects we want to work on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have stories, he has stories that we want to tell. We have friends who have stories that they want to tell.
Yeah.
And, you know, we want to be able to eventually get to all that.
Yeah.
It's a big mistake we made because we didn't end correctly for Young Avengers Live. As one of the actors and as one of the editors, we weren't checking in enough with our cast. It was a large cast, at least for us, because it was one of the first shows I worked on, and it would fluctuate between 23 and 27 people.
Yeah, we
wow.
have 35, I
Yep.
feel you.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly. So, and some of those people were teenagers, college students, in their 20s and 30s, and some of them had life changes, and they're like, "Look, I'm graduating. I'm going to go get a job or go do this thing, and I don't have time anymore." And we're like, "Oh, well, crap, you were a core character. I guess we'll try to recast you, and we did that a couple times. And
It's the good thing about horror. We just kill them.
right. Yeah, it's Young Avengers, man. They're superheroes, so that's.
Yeah.
I mean, you can, and then you can switch universes or something. But
I mean, it works for the comics,
we
right?
started diving into time travel, and like, well, guys, this is not gonna end well. And eventually we just had to stop, and we kind of had a cliffhanger at the end of one of the seasons, and we were like, sorry. And it was unfortunate because we didn't plan that correctly, and we put a little too much importance, or not, I shouldn't say importance, but a little too much stress on the people that were acting for us, and not really being conscious of where their needs were.
Staying in communication with your actors too, because burnout doesn't just happen to the creators. I know we have some people that have burned out on our show just because we're a very emotionally intense show to record, and that can weigh on you. Just from a physical standpoint, if you're hysterically crying multiple days in a booth in a row, that's going to wear you down. But so we're going to open up to questions now. So if you have a question, just raise your hand. Where's the catch box?
Check. Right here.
Oh, there it is.
Oh.
This box is made of foam, so it is a microphone.
He's been
We will-
waiting for a long time to ask
Oh
his
yeah,
question.
we'll get to you next.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
My question is mostly about editing, specifically editing with time efficiency in mind. I know when you were talking about templates, which is marvelous, but when you're editing and you have a cast, specifically a larger cast, do you find it easier to perhaps focus on editing the dialogue and then adding the sound effects in?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
I when we first started, I tried to do all of it at once. I would try to edit the scene and put in the sound effects and put in the music and ambience, and it ended up being just a huge mess for me mentally. So, what I eventually did is, like I said, now I do a rough edit of the dialogue, and I'm having done this show for 4 years now, I know what our beats are, and when I need a pause for a sound effect or anything like that, so I can edit, set that edit up for that pause, and then adjust it once I add in the sound effects.
And I think that also comes with working with your writer as well, because I know it's made me a better writer to understand Scott's audio editing process more, because then I don't muddy up the sound description with everything happening in the scene. I hope I've gotten better.
Oh, no, absolutely.
With just saying, like, Keisha leaves the room.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to know Keisha's motivation or anything there. I can discuss that with the actor, but for him in the script, she leaves the room so he knows to do receding footsteps.
Yeah. And it's, but that's part of the process, is figuring out how to make it work, and especially when you're, partnered up with someone else who's not at all, and I'm not a writer. I'm not familiar with her process at all.
And I don't know jack about audio.
You did edit that one promo.
I did that in Audacity because I wanted to help.
And I love you for that.
Yep, and it's definitely the same thing for us as well. I mean, editing doing the rough edit of the dialogue is crucial, and I know that we might do it a little different than a lot of folks, where we will break each line into their own little file, and then just kind of when we build it into the timeline, we'll just kind of place it in a timeline, so that gives us the natural spaces where we can actually layer the sound effects and whatnot in.
Yeah.
But without her doing the initial raw edit,
it would take him an additional
I'm lucky I still
day
have
just to
hair.
do all
to be
that.
honest.
Yeah.
I don't.
But definitely
But
write out your
to be fair,
workflow.
mine was gone before the show ever happened. So.
Like, make sure you know what your workflow is. So I do probably at least 5 passes just on dialogue, removing ums and ands and and removing clicks and pops, and then picking out the right lines, then lining everything up. And I just do that in cycles, especially if you need to take a break. Like, all right, I just need to do this one run.
Yeah.
Go do something else.
Yeah.
But that really lets you be efficient with your time and know exactly what your process is.
And it also helps to, again, avoid the burnout, avoid the I'll do it tomorrow, because it seems like such a daunting task. You don't climb a mountain by just starting at the bottom and jumping to the top. You have to steadily work your way up. And there was times, and this is errors I made early on, where I waited till the last minute because I'm a terrible procrastinator, and then I'm rushing, and then I send Ellie the files, and she's like, what the hell is this? This is wrong, and I have
one
to
time you sent me a muted file.
Yeah, exactly. I sent the whole file and completely missed one, because I had
is my computer not working? There's no audio.
Yeah. So instead of going, oh God, I've got to edit and mix episode 19, tomorrow, I go, okay, if I do the rough edit by, take this week, okay, so if I do the rough edit by Tuesday, that gives me Wednesday to work on sound effects, that gives me Thursday to polish the mix, and then I can deliver to them Thursday night. Then I know, okay, I'll typically get the the feedback the next morning, so then I can make my edits, or make changes. It's just a much better workflow, and what used to take us, weeks at some point, is now taking us a week or two. We've refined the process where, we're still working on it, of course. You're still always going to grow, but we've got it down to a science now, and we know what each other looks for, and so even when I'm editing, I can go, oh no, she's not going to like that, or I go, or I'll put something in and I'm like, she's going to love this.
Next question.
So, as a technical question on the writing itself, there's a big difference between writing for, say, a TV show or episodic piece and for writing, say, stories. How do you, like novels or novellas, short stories, or what have you, how do you transition those, and how do you figure out how to edit and cut them into 45-minute, half-hour episodes, and why is that a good chunk of time as opposed to doing a 3-hour set piece that can be released as one, since people love binge watching things anyway, or binge listening? How does that transition work, and why are these times important?
So the time for me, I set the time ahead of time. So then writing wise, I planned for that, because in film we say 1 page of a script is 1 minute of film. In podcasting, 1 page of a script is probably about 2 to 3 minutes of a podcast. So most of our scripts are limited to 20 to 25 pages at most. And so when I know that I have that rubric of time to work within, then I can plan it, and I typically, writing wise, I'll hit every beat that I want to hit on the episode, go ahead and write those scenes out, and then I go, okay, I'm only at about 14 pages. We do have time for this character to talk, so let's go ahead and do that. And then writing wise, I take a spreadsheet when I start, and I have every character on the x-axis?
Yes.
The column. Okay.
Yeah.
X and Y. And then on the y-axis, I have every episode number. And then I'll go through that character, and I create a cell for every emotional beat or thing that needs to happen with them, and then I just drag the cells around and go, okay, I thought I wanted him to die by episode 15, but we already have this character and this character and this character doing something, so let's move this one to this episode and this one to this episode. And that can help structure out your time as well, because then you're not overburdening yourself with realizing, I didn't cover these 5 things that I needed to cover. So you can just kind of, it's sort of like storyboarding, but with just using a grid like that, you can kind of make sure that you've got everyone's emotional beats on their row, and then you can just play with where they go.
I'm a bit more organic when I write. So I do outline, so I kind of know where I want to go. But then as I write, I let the characters kind of tell me, what the story they want to tell. In regards to the time frame, I did a lot of research in regards to audio drama, because I'd always I've either written for comics, I've written for film, or television, but I've never really done audio drama before. So I listened to a lot of different audio dramas, and the normal the amount that I usually saw was about 25-30 minutes. That's basically been the standard. Now there are some that go way beyond that. I know the recent Raiders of the Lost Ark one that just came out was fantastic, and it was an hour and a half. It was like a movie length.
It was a lot.
Yeah, and there was some time investment where you start it, and then you just try to keep going. And I think In regards to your binge question, the big difference is it really depends on your player, but a lot of times what will happen is if you start an episode and then you leave it for a little while and don't go right back, it'll restart it. So it's a lot easier for folks to just listen to a 25-minute episode and then go to episode 2 than trying to listen to 1 hour-and-a-half episode or a 2-hour episode.
And another feedback we got from a lot of listeners is just the fact that they just don't have the attention span
Yeah.
to just sit there and listen to a 3-hour-long episode.
I call it Kroger trip length.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For
the
long
most
enough
part,
to drive to the Kroger, and then I can start another episode on the way back.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Most people are listening to podcasts while they're driving to work, or like us, if we're on a road trip. If we're on a nice long road trip, that would be a good chance to listen to something that's 3 hours long. But that doesn't happen every often.
Yeah.
I mean, my drive to work is about 25 minutes, so I'm going to listen to something that's about 25 minutes or
same.
less.
Yep. And another great thing in regards to the time frame is that by capturing that 25-minute increment, the folks know that from the opening credits to the end credits, I'm going to be able to get to work in that time. One thing that we did learn is don't go overboard with this last week in Continuum Force,
Yeah.
because a lot of folks, because they're binge listening, they don't need the entire recap because it's only a couple weeks ago. They kind of remember what happens, but if for some reason it's like a 2 or 3 minute recap, they get really frustrated with that.
And this is not to say that you can't do longer if you want to. It's your show, do what you want.
Yeah.
This is just works for us.
Yeah.
But if you're going to do longer episodes, you have to give more time for production.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
And that's a great point. That a lot of it is the production schedule as well. 25-minute episodes, like you said, I could probably finish an episode in a week and a half if it's like a really, like we're going to Rome or somewhere and I have to do a lot of crazy special sound effects.
Yeah.
But if it's like a 2 or 3 hour edit,
You're going to be editing for a month or more.
That's
Yeah.
a long edit. Yeah.
Got a
Next
question?
question?
Yeah, actually, kind of following along with what he was asking, in terms of script length or whatever, when you are writing, do you write more than what the episode, what your goal time is, knowing that you're going to cut things out, or do you write, like say if you're writing a 30-minute episode, do you write 20 pages or whatever, like you said the conversion is?
So typically I will write slightly less because one of the ways that we produce is we tell our actors that they have legs. Because me as the writer, we have, especially in Blackchapel, we have 30 characters. That means I have to split my brain 30 ways. But for the person who plays Apostle Matthew, he's Apostle Matthew 100% of the time. I'm Apostle Matthew maybe 5 minutes while I write him. So I try to keep my script to what I need them to do, the beats that I need them to hit, and then in the booth, if they want to expand upon it, they just need to start and end at the same place. So if I write slightly less and trust that my actors know their characters and trust the performances that they're going to give, they can take a little bit more time. Or, when the villain needs to give a speech, I need to trust how he's going to deliver that speech, where he's going to take his pauses, so I can just write the points that he needs to hit. It might look short on the page, but it's going to wind up being 2 to 3 minutes in length for his dramatic pauses.
Yep.
And
Or
the
if we've got to account for a very slow
talking
character.
Dr. Weissman's medical minutes.
And I will say, and we experienced this in season 2 and season 3, where we had fight scenes, we had shootouts, we had action scenes. First season, not as much. Make sure that you keep accountability of how long that is, because you don't, if I'm doing a whole, shootout scene, it can't be just 30 seconds. It's got to
Right.
be,
Got to have some dramatic.
Got to have,
Yeah, it'll be-
it's like a fight scene in a movie.
Yeah.
It'll
and
be
that
one
was-
line on the page, but it'll be 4 minutes of your time.
Yeah.
That was another question I wanted to ask, actually, was what do you feel like an ideal length, generally speaking, for a scene is?
I think it's really just where the scene ends, and you kind of got to take a critical eye to what you're doing and kind of go, okay, this conversation may have gone on long enough.
Yeah.
Because our conversations don't always flow that way. Yeah, go, show.
So I can't remember where I got this information, but generally a beat or a scene shouldn't go over like 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like a general human attention span thing,
Yeah.
where like if it, and it might actually come from TV. Think of it as like, especially in sitcoms.
Yeah, that makes sense.
No scene is longer than 2.5 minutes because you get like a whole mini story. You get this next dramatic action leads to next scene. Done.
And I'll say a bit of advice that I got from working in call centers is you have no idea how long 2 minutes is. Because when we were working in the call center, our training said, check in with the customer every 2 minutes at least if you've got them on hold. And we're like, and you know, when you're working, you're like, I already got to tell, keep waiting. Because you're so busy. But for the person just sitting there listening to music, 2 minutes is a long time. And so when we started learning those beats, we would just sit in silence for 2 minutes and just feel how long that felt. And that can kind of give you a good idea of kind of developing that intuition within yourself of when the scene has gone on too long.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that as you're starting to do this, you're really going to start to feel, you know, that beat, you know, and it's just going to be organic for you. So, you know, you're going to kind of know that, okay, maybe I'm doing a little too much exposition in this thing. I'm giving the huge villain speech way too long, you know. It'll start to really feel natural for you, and then you'll just naturally be able to do it.
And it makes it easy to remember that humans are messy when they talk.
Yes.
People storm out of conversations when they're not done.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to take a scene all the way to a conclusion of a conversation. You can just have someone go, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And walk away, and you can get your resolution later.
And we interrupt each other a lot, so.
Yeah. That's what we do on this panel.
Yeah.
We got time for, I think, one more question.
Okay. So just when it comes to relationships with actors and the like, where do you find the language for releases, and do you have them sign releases of any kind? If so, where do you find the language for that, and how do you, I guess, manage the organizational side of your relationships with acting cast, producing, where you release it, where you publish your material?
So
how's all that work?
A lot of our cast are not under contract. They're mostly friends. But in the very beginning, I told them, if I'm contacting you about work, I'm your boss. If we're in the booth, I'm your boss. Outside of this, we're 100% friends. And then, so a lot of the conversations that we have with the actors come from a business point of view, so there's a lot of emotion removed from it. Because they know as a friend that they would never want to spoil my show. But then they know as an employee, this could hurt the show for these following reasons if I accidentally say this. So, and we'll have very earnest conversations. So it's a lot of just, the more open and constantly you can communicate with your actors, the better relationship you're going to build. Because if they just show up, read their lines, and go home, and you don't talk to them about anything else about the show, they don't really get excited, they don't get invested, and the more invested an actor can be, the better your product overall is going to be.
Exactly, and it's the same thing for us. I mean, a lot of our cast are friends of ours, so we don't necessarily have contracts with them as well. We do have, for our main actors, we do have professional actors doing those. For those, we do have a boilerplate, and how we got it, one of my friends happens to be a lawyer, so he gave me
we
one.
just had him write one out for us.
We were just naive and never came up with them, and then it felt weird being like, hey, you've been with us for 2 years, sign this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you can find some basic language for contracts online. Not that they're necessarily legally binding, but you can at least establish an agreement. So I mean, I've done it for like NDAs.
Yeah, I do
quite a bit.
NDAs with some of the people.
And I will also say, I'm sorry.
Oh no, we were just saying we do NDAs.
Okay. You know, like season 2, we brought in a composer. And we had to, you know, like especially when you're dealing with music, especially.
Oh yeah, this season we have a lot of contracts with our musicians.
Yeah. You know, if you're either featuring an artist's work or having someone create music for you, you have to get you have to work out the publishing.
Yeah, for Vampires of Whitechapel, we did an agreement with Midnight Syndicate, and we had to do the same thing.
Yeah, with music you have to, because it can come back and bite you in the butt.
Music law is the most important one.
Yeah, so we had to, set a contract with our composer of, we will be releasing the music on the website afterwards. We're not selling it. You own the rights, but we're still using it for promotion. You have to work that out, because, and especially if money gets involved, because
we had a contract with every band that we have featured that just says it's them giving us permission to access their music and use, and we gave them a part to say you can only use these songs, or half of them just wrote whatever you want.
Yeah.
And then we did the same we released an album for the 3rd season, because we have a non-binary rock star in this season, and the person that plays Princess actually is a musician, and said, hey, can I write music for the show? And we said, yeah, let's get you a contract, and then we can release the album, and we split the profits 50-50.
Yeah, and you definitely need a contract if you're going to deal with money.
Yeah.
And once you do that, you have to establish timeline and ownership of whatever it is that the contract is about, and that includes actors for their voice, for their likeness, if you're going to have a picture of them as their character or next to their character on a page, and just make sure you consider all of those kind of ownership and liability questions, and then also how long the contract lasts, and oh gosh, what's the other one? There's one more point I'm missing, which is that's not legally good.
Talk to a lawyer.
Rights.
Publishing rights, where it can be published.
Yes. Yeah.
Get a lawyer friend.
What's that?
Get a lawyer friend.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or a lawyer friend. Yes.
I've written a lot
And
of
so with
contracts.
that, we have come to the end. So if you guys could say where everyone can find you online, shamelessly plug yourself.
Yep.
I'm at SBM Base on all social medias, and you can find our show. Ellie will say where you can find our show, I guess. I pretty much just do the show right now.
Basically, wherever you can listen to podcasts, we also have cards with our website on it, so feel free to come up and grab one.
Sean?
You can find me at MaleNPC on Instagram and Twitter. Male_NPC, sorry. You can find me on the Dracula radio play at cryptocanicals.com, which is getting re-released right now in chronological order. So every date there's an entry, there's a podcast publishing. You can find me at Wasted K Podcast on Instagram and Twitter, which is one of my other podcasts. And I'll be doing a live show tonight in the next room over, where you could hear Charles's booming voice this whole time. We are interviewing Dr. Sarah Milkovich, who is the head of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory's Mars Rover 2020 mission, and we'll be making her some cocktails and talking to her about what she does.
And one thing I forgot, I am on a panel, Audio Production 102, next door at 4 p.m. So if you have for any audio questions, editing, sound design, stuff like that, please come out.
And you can find me on Twitter at Ellie_A_Collins, Instagram Ellie.A.Collins. You can find Blood Crow Stories at TBCS Podcast on Twitter, or thebloodcrowstories.com, or the podcast app of your choice. Thank you guys for joining us again. You have all been wonderful.
Thank you.
There's no way I could catch all that via audio. Can I?
Yes, please.
Yes.